welcome back. I'm Dr. Jeannie Gudith, your private school expert, here to share some valuable tips and trends to keep your private school thriving. So let's jump in. Today's topic is all about selling your school. So if you've ever thought about maybe retiring or transitioning into another line of work, you actually can sell your school. So I help a lot of clients with this process. Whether you're a preschool, a K through 12, a college, or a trade school, you actually can sell your school. And yes, even if it's a nonprofit, you can sell your school. So let's jump into the 5 top things that I feel are most important before you actually leap into the process of selling your school, because there are some key things that you're going to want to either think about before you sell your school, or maybe have a plan over the next 2 to 3 years if you decide to sell your school. So let's jump into the first item, which is your financial health of the school. So you're going to need to organize all of your finances over, I would say, like 3 to 5 years is usually what buyers are looking for. So your P&L statements, your tax returns, all of your financials that you have for at least the last 3 years. And if you're a school that hasn't been in business for at least 3 years, it's a little bit harder to sell your school. So I would say schools that are 5+ years, buyers are usually looking for schools with more longevity. If your school's been in business for at least 5 years, then you could possibly think about selling it. But anything before 5 years, it's a little harder to get buyers to want to purchase your school because you just don't have a long enough track record. So I would suggest your P&Ls, your tax returns, and any other documents like enrollment trends, things like that you can have on hand, because those are items that you're going to want to share with potential buyers. So make sure you have all of that data together and any kind of projection. So a lot of schools will have, at least 1 to 3 years of projections of what their P&L projections will look like. So having those on hand too is really, really helpful before you think about selling your school. Step 2 is all about your documentation and kind of the assets of your school, like what really sets your school apart from other schools. So things like accreditation, licensing, CVIS certification, anything like that is really helpful and actually increases the value of your school. So for example, when I'm listing a school for sale, I look at a bunch of different factors, but one of them is the financial health of the school, which we talked about in step 1. The second thing I look at is accreditation. Is a school accredited? Do they have any other kind of certifications that sets them apart from other schools? Do they have CVIS certification, which is a certification so that the school can issue visas to international students? Those are really big things that buyers are looking for. They're looking for accreditation, number 1, and CVIS certification is huge. So let's say you're an accredited school and you're thinking about selling. It might be worth getting CVIS certification, even if you're not going to take international students, just so that you have that certification that will bump up the sales price of your school and make you more attractive to potential buyers. So I've had clients do that. And the CVIS certification process is about 9 to 12 months. So if you have that kind of time to wait, it's really advantageous for you to go through that process, because you will attract more buyers if you do have CVIS certification. And then the other thing I look for, like let's say I'm listing a preschool, it's how many licensed seats can that preschool take. So that might be something, if you can increase the amount of seats that you have within your state, if you can do that, then that would be really helpful too if you're selling a preschool. And the same goes for colleges and trade schools. They're still looking for accreditation and CVIS certification, Title IV, things like that. All right, so let's jump into step number 3. Step number 3 is all about your operations. So all of your manuals, all of the operations, like your SIS system, LMS system, your website, all of those kinds of things, like how are those functioning? Are they updated? All of your documents should be updated, like your crisis manual, your operations manual, your human resources manual. All of those kinds of manuals should be updated before you decide to sell your school. school, because all of those documents are going to be part of the due diligence that the buyer is going to look at. And they're not going to want to look at, a parent handbook from 5 years ago. They're going to want to look at something that's new and relevant, and as well as your website. A lot of schools forget to update their websites. So that would be really important to have your website updated before you decide to list it, because that's the first thing buyers are going to go to is your website. And you want it to look really good and new and fresh so that buyers understand that they're buying a school that's updated is what they're looking for. Other things that you're going to want to think about are your facilities. Are your facilities updated? Is there anything that needs to happen? Any kind of repairs that need to happen? Those kinds of things should happen before you put your school on the market, just so when they actually come out to look at the school, it's in tip-top condition. So that takes us to step number 4, which is really all about what is the added value of your school. Do you have really high retention rates? Do you have really high profit margins? Do you have any kind of school enhancements? Like, are you a STEM school or a gifted and talented school, or something along those lines that sets you apart from other schools? Because buyers a lot of times are looking for schools that might be a little bit different than the average school, because that's really going to a lot of times help increase enrollment and make marketing a little bit easier when they know that that school has something special. So what makes your school special? Have you been around for 30 years? Have you won a bunch of awards? Are your teachers, are they all, highly certified with master's degrees or PhDs? So there's all those things that you can use to really increase the value of your school so that buyers can really see, yeah, this is a great school and it's a school that I would want to buy. And that also plays into the price point. So, I might price the school a little bit higher if I know that it's been around for 30 years, or maybe it's got amazing facilities, or, it's got some kind of program like, a gifted program or a top sports program or something like that. That can also tie into how you price your school. So really highlighting those important, valuable assets that your school brings will really help in the sales process and really attract buyers for your school. So the final step is step number 5, which is all about your evaluation and timeline. So how do you value your school? This is a question I get all the time, because people will come to me and just, want to find out, like, well, here's my school. Like, how do I know how much it's worth? So really the number 1 factor that buyers are looking at is your financial stability. So they're going to look at, the last 3 years of your P&Ls and look at, what profits are you bringing in? What's your bottom line? So that's a number that you can look at. And a lot of times, if you're just looking at that number, you can look at, taking that, your net, and multiplying it by 3, 4, 5. You can get kind of an idea. It's very, very, that's not the only way I would value the school, but you can get an idea of kind of where the range is for your school. And then you can also take into consideration factors like we talked about before, like accreditation, CVIS certification. Are there any other, programs that really enhance your school? Do you own the property? Because the property would be sold with the business. The school is considered the business. So the property would be sold with the business. So if you own the property, then you definitely want to get an appraisal of that property before you put it on the market. That's really important, because you're going to have that anyway, so you might as well do it now, because then you can appropriately price the school if you do own property. If you lease property, that's totally fine. I would say half of my clients own their property and half of them lease the property. Now, if you're leasing the property, a lot of times we will have to get the lease reassigned to the new owner, the buyer of the school. And sometimes that can take a little time, depending on if you're leasing through like a church or a synagogue or something like that. Sometimes that can be it just takes a little bit longer, because you have to get the approval from the church or the diocese or whatever it is. So sometimes that process can take a little bit longer. But if you do lease, it's really great to get a 5 or a 10-year lease term, because then the buyer feels like, okay, we're going to be here for a while and we can't get kicked out next year. So if you have a lease and your lease is up next year, you're going to want to have that lease extended before you put it on the market, because that will definitely make buyers feel a little bit more at ease. Otherwise, they have to renegotiate the lease as part of the deal. And sometimes that can put off buyers and they may not want to move forward with purchasing your school. So, and the typical timeline for selling your school is usually between 6 and 9 months. Sometimes it can take a year, sometimes it can take a little bit longer. It really depends on how large your school is. If you have multiple campuses, there's a lot that goes into it. The due diligence period alone typically is 2 to 3 months. So just having the buyer look through all of your documents can take, 90 days. So that's why we say 6 to 9 months. A lot of times closer to 9 months, just depending on, your school and what buyers are looking for. Are they looking for your specific, type of school? So I hope that's helpful. Those are the 5 steps that I would recommend doing before you even think about putting your school on the market. It will really help you looking forward, like, okay, maybe in 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years, I want to retire. Here's what you should do in that time frame to really present your school as a top tier school. So I hope that was helpful. I also have a couple links below that might help you, and a free school valuation tool that you can click on and just get an idea of what the value of your school might be worth. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Thanks so much.